Jets are moving Sauce Gardner, make him the highest paid corner in the NFL and a franchise cornerstone, to the Indianapolis Colts in exchange for receiver A.D. Mitchell and 2 first-round picks.
And he delivered this afternoon, acquiring defensive lineman Quinnen Williams from the New York Jets.
The Indianapolis Colts made a huge trade at the deadline, acquiring two-time All-Pro cornerback Sauce Gardner from the Jets in exchange for 2 first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell. And just when you thought it couldn't get any crazier, the Jets turned around and did it again. The Dallas Cowboys acquired 3-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle Quinnen Williams from New York. Dallas is sending the better of their 2027 first-round picks between the Green Bay Packers and their own, a 2026 second-round pick, and defensive tackle Mozzie Smith back to the Jets. Let me break down what went down here because this is absolutely insane. The Jets traded away their 2 best defensive players, the cornerstones of what was supposed to be a defense-first identity under new head coach Aaron Glenn. Sauce Gardner just signed a 4-year, $120.4 million extension in July, making him the highest-paid cornerback in NFL history 4 months ago. And now he's gone. Williams has been a Pro Bowler the last 3 seasons and the anchor of that defensive line. He's also gone. So let's break all this down. Before we get to the content, this video is sponsored. You guys have been flooding my DMs about our hit rate on Prize Picks. It's over 70% for this month. We've been absolutely dominating in both the NBA and the NFL. And I'm going to give you guys my pick of the week in just a sec. First, to sign up for Prize Picks, make sure you use my promo code Mikerophone so you can get $50 in lineups when you make a play of $5 or more. And then tail this pick. I have Devontae Adams and Tyler Warren each recording a touchdown, and I have JJ McCarthy getting under 214.5 pass yards. I think the line's gonna move on JJ McCarthy. This guy's been averaging like 150 pass yards a game. I don't care if he's going up against Baltimore. I expect him to have another game where he's getting the under in pass yardage. Now, if you guys want additional daily plays, I partnered up with a genius at making picks in a Discord server. The link to the Discord server is the WAP link in the description down below. It's the second link from the top. And thank you, Prize Picks, for sponsoring today's video. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? First, let's talk about why the Colts went all in for Sauce Gardner. If you haven't been paying attention to the Indianapolis Colts this season, you're missing out on something special. The Colts are putting up numbers that are making NFL historians do double takes. They're averaging 33.1 points per game, leading the entire league. But it's not just that they're scoring, it's how they're scoring. They're averaging 1.09 points per minute of possession, the highest mark ever recorded in NFL history. They're more efficient than the 2007 Patriots, the legendary undefeated regular season team. They're on pace to set the NFL record for points per play at .547. They're scoring on nearly 61% of their drives, which has never been done before. Daniel Jones, who everyone thought was washed up after his time with the Giants, is playing out of his mind. He's only been sacked 6 times all season long, the lowest in the NFL. When he's been pressured, he's completing 62.7% of his passes with 5 touchdowns and a league-high 110.3 passer rating. He's completing 75% of his third down passes while averaging over 10 yards per attempt, numbers that no quarterback has ever achieved in the last 45 years. And then there's Jonathan Taylor, who's having an MVP caliber season. He's leading the NFL in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. His 12 rushing touchdowns through 8 weeks represent the second most by any player since at least 1970. The offense is so good that it's not just leading the league, it's rewriting the record books. But here's the problem, and this is the key to understanding why they made this trade. While the offense has been otherworldly, the defense has just been okay. The Colts ranked 26th in pass defense this season and 16th in total defense. They're allowing 244.8 passing yards per game, which ranks 7th worst in the NFL. They rank 29th in third down defense at 46%, 26th in completion percentage allowed on throws of 20+ air yards at 44%, and dead last in passing yards per game outside the numbers at 152.2. So you've got this historic offense, maybe the best offense we've ever seen through 8 games, and it's being held back by a pass defense that's getting torched. The Colts are 7-2 and tied for the best record in the AFC. They're legitimate Super Bowl contenders now, but to actually win it all, they needed to fix that secondary. Enter Sauce Gardner. Now let's pivot to Dallas for a second because their story is wild too. The Cowboys made arguably the most controversial trade of the offseason when they sent Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers. Dallas shipped out their best player, a 2-time All-Pro and a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year finalist to Green Bay in exchange for 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2027 and defensive tackle Kenny Clark. Parsons signed a 4-year, $188 million extension with the Packers, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history at the time. That's a whopping $47 million per year. The Cowboys got back Kenny Clark, who's a solid player, but he's 30 years old and coming off of a season where he only recorded 1 sack. So the Cowboys got their 2 first-round picks in Clark. Then they got to work plugging holes. They acquired linebacker Logan Wilson from the Bengals earlier on deadline day, but their interior defensive line was still a major weakness. Mozzie Smith, their 2023 first-round pick, has been a massive disappointment. Clark helped, but he's definitely getting older, and this is where Quinnen Williams comes in. The Cowboys now have one of the Packers' first-rounders, and they're giving up one of their 2027 first-round picks to get Quinnen Williams, meaning that the 2026 first-round pick from this year that could be very, very valuable because the Cowboys aren't having the best season is still the Dallas Cowboys pick. Quinnen Williams is a stud. He's 27 years old, in his prime, and he's been to 3 straight Pro Bowls. He's recorded 40.5 sacks in 7 years with the team. That's elite production from an interior defensive lineman. And the Cowboys are getting a legitimate difference maker, someone who can anchor their defensive line for the next several years. So let's get to the meat of this. Did the Colts overpay for Sauce Gardner? Well, on paper, 2 first-round picks for a cornerback is a massive haul. Gardner is only the 6th player to be traded in season for multiple first-round picks in the last 40 years. But here's the thing that people need to understand. The Colts are 7-2 right now. They're not just in the playoff hunt, they're fighting for a first-round bye and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. The Colts have a 98.2% chance to make the playoffs and a 19% chance to win the Super Bowl. They're the best positioned team in the league to make the playoffs right now. So when the Colts gave up 2026 and 27 first-round picks, they're not giving up top 10 picks. They're giving up picks that are going to be in the 20s, maybe even in the late 20s if they keep winning. Gardner is only 25 years old. He's got 5.5 years left on his contract through 2030. The contract structure actually makes this trade easier for the Colts because they're on the hook for a $20 million option bonus in 2026, but the signing bonus was only $13.75 million. The Jets are eating $19.75 million in dead cap spread through 2027. The Colts have already invested in their secondary this offseason, signing Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, and they have Kenny Moore on a high-end slot corner contract. Now they've got Gardner as their true cornerback 1. That's an elite secondary that can match up with anyone. So did they overpay? Well, in a vacuum, 2 first-round picks for a cornerback is a lot, but if you want to draw a parallel to the last time this happened when the LA Rams traded 2 first-round picks to the Jacksonville Jaguars to get Jalen Ramsey, those 2 first-round picks from the Rams turned into Kalavion Kason and Travis Etienne, so it was clear that the Rams won that trade. The Colts' biggest weakness was their passing defense, so in my opinion, they didn't overpay. They paid market value for an elite player who fills their biggest need at the exact moment that they need him the most. Now let's look at the Cowboys side. Did the Cowboys overpay for Quinnen Williams? They gave up their better 2027 first-round pick, a 2026 second-round pick, which could potentially be the equivalent of a late first-round pick in this year's NFL draft, and Mozzie Smith. That's a significant package, but let's put it in context. First, the Cowboys didn't give up a 2026 first-round pick. It's in 2027, which means Dallas has flexibility next year to use that Packers pick or their own depending on how the season plays out. That's crucial, and it gives them options. Second, Mozzie Smith has been a bust. Let's call it what it is. He was the 26th overall pick in 2023, and he's done nothing. So the Cowboys are essentially trading a failed pick, which has negative value, for an established Pro Bowler. Third, Williams is in his prime at 27 years old. He's got years of elite play left. He's under a 4-year, $96 million extension he signed with the Jets in 2023, with $66 million guaranteed. That's a reasonable number for an interior defensive lineman of his caliber. And here's the thing that makes the trade even better for Dallas. They still have the Packers first-round picks from the Parsons trade. So they essentially traded Parsons for Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, a 2026 second-round pick, and a first-round pick that they still control. That's pretty good value when you consider that Parsons was going to command $47 million per year, and the Cowboys weren't willing to pay that. The Cowboys are getting a 3-time Pro Bowl defensive tackle who can immediately upgrade their interior defensive line. So did the Cowboys overpay? I don't think so. They gave up 1 future first-round pick pick, a second rounder, and a bust. And in return, they got an elite interior defensive lineman in his prime who could be a cornerstone of their defense for years. And they still have ammo left over from the Parsons trade to make more moves. That's solid asset management by Jerry Jones and the Cowboys front office. So does this mean the Parsons trade was worth it for the Cowboys? Well, it's still tough to say. The Cowboys now have used assets to completely reshape their defense. They got Clark, who's been solid, if unspectacular. They acquired Logan Wilson from the Bengals, and now they have Quinnen Williams. So essentially, they traded Parsons and got 3 defensive starters back. Plus, they still have an extra first-round pick in the bank. From a pure value standpoint, that's not bad. From a talent standpoint, it's debatable. Micah Parsons is a generational talent, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL, but he was going to eat up a massive chunk of their cap, and the Cowboys had other holes to fill. By trading him, they got flexibility to address multiple positions instead of putting all their eggs in one basket. The Cowboys needed help at defensive tackle, linebacker, and in their secondary. They now address 2 of those 3 positions with the capital from the Parsons trade. But was it worth it? Well, that's going to depend on how the Cowboys continue to perform this season and beyond. If they can stay competitive and Williams becomes a cornerstone of their defense, then yes, it was worth it. If they crater and those Packers picks end up being late first rounders that don't pan out, then they gave up a Hall of Fame caliber player for pennies on the dollar. Right now, I'd say it's too early to tell, but the early returns are pretty positive. The Cowboys got value back, they addressed needs, and they avoided paying Parsons an absolutely massive contract that could have hamstrung them for years. Jerry Jones compared it to the Herschel Walker trade, saying it could jumpstart their dynasty. That's classic Jerry hyperbole, but there is a kernel of truth there. Sometimes you have to trade a superstar to build a championship roster. Now let's talk about the Jets, because this is where things get really interesting. Did the Jets make one of the biggest mistakes in franchise history by trading both Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams on the same day? Well, let's start with the context. The Jets are 1-7. They're terrible. Aaron Glenn is the first coach in Jets history to start 0-7, and they didn't pick up their first win until week 8. The team is averaging 31.4 points allowed per game through 5 games, which is the worst in the league. So they traded away their 2 best defensive players, the guys who were supposed to be the cornerstones of Aaron Glenn's defense. But trading Sauce and Quinnen sends a very clear message. This is a full rebuild. The Jets are tearing it down to the studs and starting over. And that makes sense when you look at what they got back. Let's tally up the haul. From the Colts, they get 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2027 and A.D. Mitchell. From the Cowboys, they get a 2027 first-round pick, a 2026 second-round pick, and Mozzie Smith. The Jets now have 3 first-round picks in 2027 and 2 first-round picks in 2026 and 2 second-round picks in 2026. That's insane draft capital. But the question is, can the Jets actually use that capital effectively? History says no. Some people think that the Jets will somehow mess it up with these picks, and honestly, that's not an unfair concern. The Jets have struggled to draft well for years. Why would it be different now? The Jets press notes that Aaron Glenn and Darren Mogi are following the Lions' blueprint, building from the trenches and emphasizing physicality. That approach worked in Detroit, so maybe it'll work with New York. But there's another angle to consider. Gardner and Williams are both young and elite players. Gardner is 25 and Williams is 27. These aren't aging veterans on the decline. These are guys in their prime who could be cornerstones of a championship defense for the next 5 to 7 years. The Jets are eating $11 million in dead money in 2026 and $8.1 million in 2025 from Gardner's contract. They just made him the highest paid cornerback 4 months ago, and now they're paying him to play for another team. That's brutal optics. And then there's the Aaron Glenn factor. Glenn wanted to build a defense-first identity, with the defensive line setting the tone. While Williams was the leader of that defensive line, Gardner was supposed to be the lockdown corner anchoring the back end. Now they're both gone, and Glenn has to completely reimagine his defensive philosophy. So did the Jets make a mistake? On paper, they got tremendous value. 3 first-rounders in 2027 is historic draft capital, but they gave up 2 young, elite defensive players who were supposed to be building blocks. If the Jets nail those picks and find franchise-altering talent, this trade will look brilliant in 3 years. But if they whiff on those picks, or if they use them to trade up for the wrong quarterback, this will go down as one of the biggest blunders in franchise history. And every team has risks here. For the Colts, the biggest risk is that Gardner doesn't return to his 2022 to 2023 form. Pro Football Focus grades him with a 71.3 overall grade and 68.7 coverage grade this season, ranking 21st and 27th among cornerbacks. That's way down from his All-Pro years. NFL Plus notes that Gardner hasn't allowed more than 2 receptions to a single receiver in a game this season and has forced a tight window on 61.9% of his targets. He's still playing well, but the interceptions aren't there. The question is whether that's because of the Jets' terrible situation or because he's actually declined. If it's the former, he'll thrive in Indianapolis with a better pass rush and better safety play. If it's the latter, then the Colts just gave up 2 first-round picks for a corner who's already peaked. There's also injury risk. Gardner missed week 8 with a concussion. Cornerback is a physical position and injuries can happen. If he gets hurt and misses significant time, those 2 first-round picks are gone for nothing, very similarly to what happened with the Commanders and Marshawn Lattimore. If the Colts don't win it all within the next 2 years, they'll be left without first-round picks to reload, and their window could slam shut faster than anyone expects. The Cowboys' biggest risk is that the Quinnen Williams trade is just a band-aid on a bigger problem. The Cowboys' defense ranks 2nd worst in EPA per play throughout the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. They were marginally better against the run than the pass, but they're bad at both. Williams will help, but one interior defensive lineman can't fix everything. The Cowboys still need edge rushers after trading Parsons. Their top edge rusher now is Dante Fowler Jr., and that's not exactly inspiring. The other risk is that they gave up too much. A 2027 first rounder and a 2026 second rounder is a significant package. If Williams gets hurt or doesn't perform up to expectations, the Cowboys will have traded away valuable picks for nothing. And then there's the cap situation. Williams is making good money, Clark is expensive, and Logan Wilson isn't cheap either. The Cowboys have spent a lot of resources on defense, and if it doesn't translate to wins, then they're in trouble. The Jets' biggest risk is simple. Can they actually hit on these draft picks? History shows that late first-round picks have a pretty low success rate compared to top 10 picks. If the Colts stay good and the Cowboys start winning, then the Jets could end up with picks in the mid to late 20s. Those picks statistically don't produce Pro Bowlers very often. There's also the opportunity cost. The Jets could have kept Gardner and Williams and built around them. They're both young and elite. Instead, they're starting over and hoping that they can find players who are half as good as the guys they just traded. So in my opinion, who won these trades? Well, in the short term, I believe the Colts won their trade against the Jets. They got an elite cornerback in his prime who immediately upgrades their biggest weakness. They're 7-2 with a historic offense and legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. Gardner gives them a legitimate shot to win it all this year and next year. Long term, it depends on whether Gardner returns to his all-pro form and whether the Colts can win it all. If they do, nobody will care what happens to those picks. If they don't, and if those Jets picks turn into Pro Bowlers, this could age poorly. But right now in this moment, the Colts won this trade. For the Jets, they got great value on paper. 2 first rounders and A.D. Mitchell is a solid return for a cornerback, even one as good as Gardner. But the real question is whether they can turn that draft capital into impact players. For the Cowboys and Jets trade, this one's a little different. The Cowboys needed interior defensive line help after the Parsons trade, and they got it with Quinnen Williams. A 3-time Pro Bowler in his prime is exactly what Dallas needed to anchor their defense. They gave up 1 future first, a second, and a bust in Mozzie Smith. That's reasonable value, but the context matters. The Cowboys still have one of the Packers' first-round picks from the Parsons trade, so they essentially turned Parsons into Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, Logan Wilson, a 2026 second-rounder, and a first-round pick. That's pretty good asset management, even if you lose the best individual player in the deal. For the Jets, they added another first-rounder and a second-rounder to their already massive haul. That's 3 first-rounders in 2027, which is historic. But again, it all comes down to whether they can use that capital effectively. In the Parsons context, the Cowboys traded a generational talent and got back multiple good players and draft picks. They avoided paying Parsons $47 million per year, which would have hamstrung their cap. They've addressed multiple positions of need. That's smart roster management, even if you lose the best player. But the Packers got Micah Parsons, one of the 5 best defenders in the NFL. They're now legitimate Super Bowl favorites. If Parsons helps them win a Super Bowl, nobody in Green Bay will care about what they gave up. So I know this is a lot to digest, and I apologize for this getting to you guys so late because we had a lot to cover, but this was an absolutely insane trade deadline. We have more trade deadline videos. I'm going to leave it in the end screen. I'll meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.